Check. Oh, check, check. Start off the day by almost knocking the microphone off the thing, knocking the stand all out of alignment. Come on now, soul. What's going on here? What is happening? Hello, everyone. Oh. How long have you been there? What's up? Welcome back. Welcome back to the Inner Storyteller. Welcome back to your real life. Welcome back to the channels. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to said channels. I would greatly appreciate it and find ways to show my appreciation once enough of y'all do that. If you are here, you are in for real conversations. We talk about natural law, we talk about religion, money, anarchy, culture, and how mankind is manipulated by forces that do not have our best interests at heart, perhaps because they are completely evil. And we are not bashing faith systems here. We are not calling people stupid for, having a religion, following a religion. Um, we are simply examining psychological causes and effects of the stories we have the most faith in, the ones we have the most stake in, and how they shape society. And that examination has to sit right alongside an honest look at the current human condition, which is slavery. Government is slavery, good people. And the question we have to keep coming back to is what can actually be improved with a proper understanding of the inner storyteller and how it works. And you know, the inner storyteller is a brainchild of mine that was born from my study, contemplation, and personal philosophy surrounding the concept of morality, of right and wrong, or um, spiritual correctness or spiritual incorrectness. My personal journey with right and wrong in any type of way that I would call studying didn't start until my mid 20s. Didn't start in earnest until my mid 20s, about 24 or so. I had already been exposed to certain content via books, YouTube, um, you know, speeches by doctors that were doing, kind of miraculous things with herbs or alkaline water or, some sort of frequency healing machine or whatever. I had already been exposed to the notion that what I was taught about morality, what I was taught about right and wrong, may be incorrect, may be so far off the mark. But I didn't feel like I had to really dive deep into morality. Um, I didn't feel like I had to really dive into it until really until I was like really serious about my wife. And I just noticed I had all these bad habits that I was bringing to her front door, you know? And they were all bad, in my opinion, because of this inner knowing of an operational morality, a personal ethics code or honor code or something of the sort, right? Which the personal one is not going to be claimed today as the objective universal one. But the personal one is what gives your inner storyteller data. So that's, I'm growing up and, you know, kind of exposing myself to content, and people are sharing things, and I'm looking into it and I'm reading the books and whatever. And I get married, and I'm like, okay, cool, like, you know, I need to do right by her. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means I need to be spiritually correct in how I conduct myself i- with being a husband. Okay, well, what's spiritually correct? Well, an easy answer to that is just what's morally right. And then that leads to the initial real question that matters. Is morality objective? Is there is there something that would create a relationship with truth if I decide that certain things are always wrong or always right, or just that there is a real, like, if I was gonna kind of refuse to just attribute it to a sky daddy that gave us a book and said this is how you interpret right and wrong, and it's like a really confusing book in that regard, at least, right? When you take the Old Testament and the New Testament together, it gets really hard. So if I was to just not go with that option and say, is there something objective about having a moral code and living by a moral code? And what I found is that indeed there is. And the best person that put me into, like, gave me some grammar to be able to convey why morality is indeed objective and not just preference, not just subjective, is Mark Passio. Now, I don't attribute all of what I know from Mark Passio, but he's just, in my opinion, objectively the best at synthesizing the information into language that is both simple and yet deeply true in this regard, as well as telling the right stories to get the truth across to those that have ears to hear and eyes to see. He's the best. He's the best presenter on morality, in my opinion. Now, and his website, by the way, is whatonearthishappening.com. You should definitely give Mark Passio a listen, if you will. But if you go to his podcast, his rule is you got to start from episode one, and I highly recommend, start from episode one, and he just kind of takes you through his whole personal philosophy, um, and it's extremely informed. So check him out. One of the things that Mark talks about as far as morality and its objectivity or objective nature goes is the fact that what can be obscured for the mind, but when the mind is obscured, is still active in nature, is objective, or objectively in relationship with truth, right? Like, if it's still wrong, even if you lost your mind when you did it, then uh like, even if you can't be blamed for it, but the action still happened, right? Or if you can be blamed for it because you chose to inebriate yourself so badly in a situation where that was completely irresponsible, or something, like there were a bunch of kids around or something, I don't know, right? And then you lost your mind and then you did something. Uh You wouldn't have done it sober, right? But it's still wrong. Then that's objective. And that makes a lot of sense. That's not a very academic statement, and that Mark didn't say that. Uh, that is not how he would word anything. But that's true because the the terminology he uses to describe the objectivity of morality is natural law. He says natural law is the set of non-man-made, unchanging, binding laws that govern the consequences of our behavior according to the moral weight of our choices. And that's natural law, right? And he says some people call it consequentialism, some people call it God's law, some people call it karmic law. And it doesn't matter what you call it. It's something that is beyond manipulation by human beings. We cannot collectively or individually manipulate that, just like we can't change the any other natural law. Can't change, in my like the way that I use the term natural law when I write in my two books. Um, it encompasses the physical, metaphysical, electromagnetic, like all of the other laws of nature and the laws that govern the consequences of the, our choices, right? According to the moral weight of our choices. And obviously, the first question that comes to mind is, well, okay, with that said, why do our emotions what role do our emotions play in all of this? Because we can delude ourselves into thinking that something is morally right that is not morally right. Like, for instance, following an order from your superior without choosing consciously to do the action described in the order, right? Abdicating the responsibility of performing the action as told to the one giving the order, not to yourself who's actually doing the action, which is what a lot of administrators, nurses, doctors, soldiers, police, um, scientists do. They just follow the order and say, I was just doing my job. Pharmacists, well, maybe not the pharmacist, but like manufacturers of pharmacy found substances. You know what I'm saying? I was just doing my job. I just work here, bro. I just work here, bro. Right? We can delude ourselves into thinking that something that is morally wrong is morally right, and something that is morally right is morally wrong. And there was a famous author that said, um, to that effect, the two greatest problems facing humanity are that we refuse to believe what is true and we believe what is untrue. And I'm paraphrasing. And yeah, man, is that we believe that which is untrue, we accept lies and live by them and demonstrate defense of the lies, of the stories that contain the lies. We defend them. And on the same token, in the same breath, in the same minute, we refuse to believe that which is true, that which would wake us up from the lie, from the story containing the lies. Almost all of our collective problems can come down to that, right? Our adherence to the religion of monetary value keeps us glued in these systems that cause man to, you know, reach the conclusion that we have to be governed by a body of other people, which is the religion of man's authority. This is the mother and father of all religion, right? The mother being the religion of monetary value, that there's some sort of value that can be attributed to uh, um, currency. How do I want to say this? The religion of monetary value is the religion that says there can be an unnatural, artificial, completely imaginary value attributed to a part of a story of accounting, right? A part of a kind of story of accounting that wants to, once it starts, it wants to close the loop on itself so that the books are balanced. There is no such value. And there never has been. And yet, from the very first writings of man in Sumer, in ancient Sumer, the first civilization with writing, you had bills of exchange, you had bills of lading, you had accounting, you had IOU notes. In ancient Egypt, you had gold, you had currency, the religion of monetary value, which is always built on the lie that there is such a thing as monetary value, that we can do something that is disconnected from nature, i.e., like I said, give an accounting unit measurement of value to something that we call like financial value, monetary value, to a resource or to, symbols on a piece of paper. Doesn't matter if it's actual gold, that you can like run out of supply of, or uh if it's just symbols on pieces of paper that you can print almost infinitely. Um that you can use this universally accepted value to do projects with real resources and real sweat, blood and tears, like real equity, real participation, time, attention, effort. These things you can't trade. Well, you can. Obviously you can. You shouldn't trade fake value for real value. Not in a way that like this game of the monetary system has to be directly tied to all of our survival in the way that it is. And you may say, but so, without money, without the invention of this thing called monetary value, we wouldn't have advanced. We would be in tents and caves right now. Well, first of all, there's really no evidence for that. There's no evidence that advancement is caused by the religion of monetary value. The causality, it would be hard. I don't think that's a philosophically or logically defensible position on its face. But granted that position, I say that even if the speed in which certain inventions were made available to like millions of people, right, were mass distributed, like means to create books, um, even if certain technologies did not spread at the same speed, and even if we were more inclined in certain ways to communicate via like over long distances via like telepathy and intuition and empathy and certain things like that, which is also very possible. And if you watch the telepathy tapes, you'll see there's more and more schools around the world, especially outside of America. There's more and more programs that are literally aimed at and teaching how to be fully engaged in both the seen and the unseen, which are not separate from each other. Um, and what, just go on Instagram and search, you know, kids with telepathy, or school for uh like seeing with a blindfold on or whatever. Like these kids are riding bikes with blindfolds on, and they grew up in their houses raised by millennials, right? They're just not here in America. Anyway, even if back in the day, if we didn't invent the monetary system and certain technologies were either obsolete or not distributed around the world at the same speed, the um the constraints that this religion, the religion of monetary value, put on humanity's creative capacity, right? Because again, once you create the religion of monetary value, it necessitates the religion of man's authority. That's my philosophy. That's what I talk. That's my take. Let me know if you agree, disagree in the comments. But if you, as soon as your region, as soon as the people in control of your resources, could be the elders of a tribe, could be your government, could be the monarch, the king, the queen, whatever. As soon as as soon as we operate with a currency, you are um on route to having a ruler, and a corrupt one at that, in my personal opinion. Now, we don't have less creative capacity without monetary incentive. We know this because rags to riches is a very common theme in art. The greatest artists are sometimes the people with the most impoverished backgrounds. And then they become the richest artists when they're the greatest. Kanye West comes from Chicago. He's a billionaire. You know what I'm saying? Um, and his music is played at the dances, at the clubs, at the family reunions. His music is played everywhere, all the time, around the world. He's one of the best, and he comes from no money, right? So we know that not having money, or not having a lot of money, or whatever, doesn't decrease creative capacity. We also know that having a lot of money doesn't increase creative capacity. A lot of the worst artistic displays are done by rich people. People that were born into it and stayed rich their whole life. Um, no, that's not all of them. Obviously, you have the best teachers and certain things. Yeah, you can get very, very good and come from money. I'm not saying all of either one. Obviously, some of the worst art also comes from the hood. Anyway, money does not determine one's creative capacity. Therefore, a world that's operating on a resource based economy and not a monetary value based economy does not erase human beings' creative capacity to solve problems, like there's more people, we need more meat and ways to store it. There's more people, we need more lumber, or trees made into lumber and ways to store it. There's more people, we need more ways to live in nature comfortably and harmonically. Like our creative capacity to solve these problems, especially when we come together, does not diminish. Also, the resources that are around us do not disappear just because we don't create a transaction in between having the idea and getting the project to its completion, right? The erasure of the transaction or transactions in any project erases none of the real work and erases none of the real resources. the real existing resources in nature, not just symbols on the paper, but actually existing in nature resources. Whatever the project was, right? A plumbing project, uh, uh, anything. And because the religion of monetary value requires us to, you know, place arbitrary value unit values, if you will, like place arbitrary unit values on physical measurements and sometimes imaginary measurements if it's like intellectual property, but physical measurements of property, whether that property be things like land and water, uh, rain, or because it's illegal to collect rainwater because they say the city actually owns the rainfall or what have you. Um, I forget the beginning of this sentence. I know what I'm talking about, but I forget the beginning of this sentence. I was saying something, I got sidetracked. What I'm getting at is we give the power to control the allocation of resources over to those in control of the religion of monetary value by allowing them to place arbitrary value on real live resources that take real effort and real sweat and real equity to do projects with. It is this distortion that is at the very root of almost all shared human problems that are tied to morality, right? And it's not the existence of the idea of money that does the damage. It's the refusal to acknowledge the fact that there's nothing real about it and that we're using it in a way that we're trying to make it as real as the real resources and sweat and effort that will be doing the projects. You can't. You can never make money as real as the people and effort and resources that we use to do projects. But the religion of monetary value requires you to create the illusion of just as much reality in the thing that can never exist on the same in the same way. And then, like I said, when the real resources are all under the control of the order giver class, of those that create the rules for the monetary system, and then they appoint their layers of protection, right? Their bureaucratic layers of protection, their law enforcement type layers of protection, their religion layers of protection, their mind control layers of protection through media and school and billboards. I don't know, everything, right? It's logically very simple for someone to see exactly what our problem is when it comes to a moral code. And again, it doesn't mean the problem is money or the problem is the idea of money or the concept of money at all. That's not it, right? It's what we do with it. It's or our actions actually do with it. Um, and we have to acknowledge that our actions include not informing ourselves about what this thing is, this toy we call money actually really is. The resources that I'm talking about keep us alive. When we place all of the control of the resources that keep us alive within the hands of a few individuals that control the monetary system, we are doing something objectively immoral. And when we don't challenge that system, if we were born into it, after we learn enough about it to know that it's wrong, even if that challenge so far amounts to trying to get the message out so that other people understand, like you do, that something is wrong here, then we're also doing something wrong by being silent. Now, what makes morality objective? Well, karma. The fact that you get a manifested, response log to your choices in such a way that for major choices in your life, most people can look back at a few choices that resulted directly in karmic consequences, especially when there are negative ones, and they can think, uh, i- i- you know, with varying degrees of certainty. I'll acknowledge from the gate, but that not in a way that I think dismisses the point altogether. But every you can see when life responded to some of your choices and like tapped you on the bottom for it, right? Tapped you on the top of the head, said, "Hey, stop doing stuff like that." And it doesn't have to be anything more than maybe a door closing or somebody saying no, but like that something else was tied to that, right? That's very common phenomenon. Not only that, but also you can test by way of learning your history what the collective karmic what the collective actions of a given society had been, and what the karmic response to that given society has been in comparison to all other societies that have relevant similar or relevantly opposite um, cultural trends, and what the karmic responses were to those other societies. You can test it, right? I would say it's very tricky to test karma, if you will, with individuals. At least I can't off the top of my head come up with an experiment that's good enough in my head. But you can look at history, cultural trends, fact check along the way, and these things, and you can see that somehow the same, very similar, if you will, or the same response from nature, including the human beings that exist in nature, happen when the same actions are taken, or and they don't happen in the same exact time. And there's an element of karma that is of the unseen, just like anything else that speaks of nature in this broad sense. But there is a visible through line that gives reality to the fact that what happened to the society is a karmic consequence, is a moral consequence. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what makes morality objective, is the fact that you can test it and you universally see it, right? You can test for it by way of observation of history, and you can test for it by way of observation in your own life, anecdotally, which is not, you know, you can't push that onto other people with certainty, but you can see if that works in your own life. And for you, just see, okay, well, okay, in my life, karma is real, right? You confirm that much. And also, um, you can like read about it, philosophize about it, kind of learn it, stick around, and it'll just click for you. Uh, there's nothing else. Everything else about the study or looking into morality is indeed subjective. But the fact that you can test it, you can see you can see the fact that the moral weight of your choices are responded to in life by not by you, but by people in nature is objectivity. It's the definition of objectivity, almost. Um, Another thing I wanted to get into a little bit is the argument that, well, you can't know morality, you can't know like what the list is of right and wrong because it'll only ever be just preference. Like whatever you say is just preference. I completely disagree. I think there are specific transgressions that boil down to one theme of a transgression, that when you perform these things, you get negative um, karmic response from life, from God, if you will. You get a negative. Something happens against your objectives or against the result of your objectives or whatever. If you transgress, and then if you do anything else, you don't get negative. You may get neutral, or you may get absurdly positive fruits, right? Regardless, the transgressions boil down to killing, well, murder, right? Because if you, let's say you kill, and let's say it's maybe even on accident in self-defense, in true and honest self-defense, I don't think necessarily you'll be severely punished for that. Um, so murder, theft, um, physical harm that doesn't necessarily result in a murder, but physically bullying, physically initiating violence on somebody else, right? We'll just call it violence. Violence, not to be confused with defensive physical force. So we got murder, theft, violence, and I'll say lying, right? Intentional deceit of yourself or someone else. And there may be another one, but that's basically it. And they all boil down to don't steal. They all boil down to some form of theft. When you lie to somebody, you rob them of their ability to make a clear decision based on all of the information that you know when you're being tasked to give them information. When and then there's also, obviously lies that are far more malicious, but at bare minimum, you're robbing them of the freedom to know what you know when they got to make a decision. Uh when you murder somebody, you're stealing their life and you have no right to do so. When you initiate harm on somebody, that it's not defense, you're just initiating harm on somebody because you feel like you want to hurt somebody. You're stealing their freedom. You're stripping them of their right to be comfortable in their own body. Right? That goes for sexual abuse. That goes for physical abuse. That goes for yelling at somebody so bad that you physically hurt them. All of those type of things. Um, right? And then when you steal, you steal. So when if you are not performing a transgression that strips the rights or strips the freedoms from somebody or strips the life from somebody, then you are doing something that's morally neutral or correct. I think it's very simple. There are a lot of minds out there that think it's super complicated. I don't know why, but I disagree. And with that said, good people, I think I have yapped on enough about morality for today. Just wanted to have, a little bit of a discussion with you guys. Didn't want to type out a script, so today we just came straight off the dome. And thank you all for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. Liking tells YouTube to push the content. Subscribing tells YouTube I may one day be eligible for monetization. So please help your boy out in that regard, and I will see you all tomorrow in the next episode. Peace.